What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now Back to the Past. I'm Alex, and in this video, want to take a look at Dragon Ball Z Budokai 2. We're going through this series, getting ready for Sparking Zero, which will one day grace our consoles or preferred platform. And we did a video a few months back on the first game. It did really well, and I really appreciate all the support there. And it's time to look at its sequel. So in terms of the history, we sometimes do that, sometimes we don't. There's not actually too much in terms of the history that I want to delve into with this game, other than to say this was part of those yearly releases. In fact, I believe looking at the North American release date, it actually came out 1 year to the day after the first game. So first game was December 4th, 2002, and the next game was December 4th, 2003, and we got Budokai 2. Now, I actually have it physically here. Let's take a quick look. I mean, let me just say something. When I think of Dragon Ball, you can see behind me, when I think of the Budokai games, Tenkaichi is probably the one that comes to mind, but if I think about just the Budokai without the Tenkaichi part, this is probably the cover. I always appreciated the coloring of it. I really, really like that there's only, kind of in the central part to it, right, is the color. Nothing else really is, but the back of it is phenomenal, and I think this is my wife's. I remember renting this, and we're going to get into that when we get to the story mode of this game, but this one specifically, I do believe is my wife. But the thing is, I think her brother threw out at one point this old gem here, the manual. Got to keep the manuals, boys and girls, and so I had to go out searching on different websites online to get the full, full package. So got the manual, got the disc, and of course you see my memory card, which I did use for Budokai 2. But this is the one that I actually remember playing, okay? And I probably mentioned that in the first video or first game. When I think of these games, again, I probably do think of Tenkaichi, and I think of different kind of moments or different gameplay features in these games, but I really do think to this game in particular, I think to the cover, and I also think to its story mode. So this was probably in I don't even know if this is my renting period in life. I probably owned this game, and for whatever reason, I don't know where it is now, I am definitely not in possession of it. Like I said, this is my wife. So what I want to do, let's take a look at this game, and there's a couple features I definitely want to focus on, from the gameplay to other stuff, but I want to start with the story mode. And this was something, okay? When I played the first game, I had a blast, and I really liked the story mode, and I know not everybody's a huge fan of it, but I enjoy it. I like the cutscenes, and in the first video, we talked about how at least one thing that I find very, very funny is some of the skips that happen. Sometimes you'll have a cutscene and it jumps multiple episodes, or it jumps maybe even almost an entire arc, and you just get these weirdly stitched together moments or fights or cutscenes, but honestly, it's kind of fun. It's kind of cool. This game doesn't necessarily do that, and again, I remember that. I didn't remember until I played it, and I haven't looked at Dragon Ball Budokai 2 in years and years and years, but as soon as you fire up that story mode and you get what I would guess I would call it, at least right now, is the grid, right? The risk board. When I saw that, I turned to my wife and I said, "Oh, I remember this." And I remember not really being a big fan. Now, here's the situation, okay? I'm 27. I'm a whole lot older than what I was when I first played these games. I can respect it to a great degree. But I am going to say, at least in the front here, that I don't think it's better, at least in the setup, than the first game. Again, I know not everybody's a huge fan of the first game story mode, but I like those moments. And they really do, I guess, generally follow storylines, right? And I think they do a pretty killer job. And honestly, sitting here now, I played that game only a few months back. I reset up. By the way, I played the PS2. I have my setup. I think I showed a picture in the last video. I set up the PS2. I set up all the freaking cords to record myself playing it. You're seeing all the actual footage from me. And boy, it is a very interesting journey to go on. But playing them back to back, you notice things. I definitely notice things in terms of gameplay. But one thing I noticed in terms of story is I can respect the going off the deep end portion of it, but at the same time, I cannot say that it lands and has a similar impact than the first game has, for better or worse. I think the first game is more succinct. To me, it's better. In this one, they are rushing through storylines. They are skipping things. They are introducing events and scenarios that don't actually even happen. Now, Majin Buu has always been one of my personal faves, okay? So to be able to fight and then play as multiple versions of this individual, we'll call him, I really like. I really can appreciate it, but at the same time, again, playing it back to back, I thought, oh, we're really going to tell his arc. We're going to do that using floppy chessboard pieces, and like his kind of resurrection or his coming into, and characters are being eliminated, let's just say for YouTube purposes, characters are being like removed off the board, literally off the board, like their pawn is being kind of like flicked away, and it's going, so it's just not the impact that I would have liked. Now, is it all bad? No, and I don't even know I would call it bad. Again, I think I can respect the weirdness, the wackiness of it, but I don't know if I would say that it's good, right? But I can respect a few things. I can respect kind of the variety. I think what they did in this game is, well, look, we're going to tell a lot of what we've already done. Like, they went through several similar things and similar story arcs that they did in the first game. And that's probably going to happen when you make a game back-to-back years, right? How much can you really expect? Fair, okay? At the same time, they say, okay, well, we can't do the cutscenes again like we just did them. And, they're all voiced. And I think, as we talked about in the last video, I think the voice work is actually really, really good. I think the set pieces and some of the action, some of the actual cutscenes, I think they're really good in the first game. All right, we can't pull that off again, right? So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to do this Risk-like board, but we're going to have a little variety to it. And the thing that I can respect about the second game is the replayability and the slightly different things that can happen. Now, it's not too much. Like, let's not fool ourselves to thinking this is like Baldur's Gate 3, right, with all of the different choices. There's not too many choices that you can take into a match or take into a map, I guess you could call it, right? But it does provide something a little extra that the first game could not do, right? So, like, you're always going to have your Goku, and Goku's the only one that's, like, the actual person, right? Like, he runs around, he moves around. Everybody else is, like, the floppy. I remember that. Like I told you, when I was watching it play out, which, by the way, legendary opening, right? The intro to this game is mind-numbingly great. But when you get in and you see them kind of, like, flop around, right? And then they start to make their moves. That is what I remember. I remember the board, and I remember like just the pawns, like the bendiness of them. That is a childhood memory that I'll never forget. It's kind of silly, but it's also kind of cool. And again, like, you can bring in people to kind of help you out, and that adds a little bit of replayability. Now, in my time playing this, I actually I believe in the first level, to exit a game on PS2 is very weird. I think to exit this game specifically is also kind of weird. I think I restarted it. Actually, I know I restarted it, but I thought I was just like backing out to go back in. So I ended up having to do the first zone 2 times, and maybe I even had to do the second zone 2 times. That made me very frustrated, but I actually did get a little of the replayability without even trying. I wasn't attempting to replay it, but I actually did it to myself on accident. So I do think that's there. I think the ability to choose different people and maybe take like alternate paths, right? Now, what do those things ultimately amount to? Is it amounts to different combinations of fighters, right? Now, they're not all to the same scale, right? Like, what I at least notice, and this could not be true, but when you have the right person fighting the right person, there will be kind of a more played out, long, voiced interaction. Now, it's not heavily animated. It's not an actual cutscene, I wouldn't call it, right? But there's a little bit of effort put into it. If you have the wrong person, I say wrong, in quotations, it's not necessarily wrong, there's less there. You will get a little interaction. You will sometimes get voices, but you won't get, actually, I think maybe all the time you get voices, but you don't get the full thing, right? I feel like, and I just kind of experienced it. Again, I could be wrong here, but it feels like when you had the actual right people that maybe that storyline was setting up, or, they're narrating as they kind of all crash land into that region. If you get the right people to face the right people, it kind of rewards you with a little bit more of a conversation before you jump in, right? And honestly, I don't know if there's all that much more to say about the actual setup, at least, right, of the story mode. I think it's fine. I think it's weird. Again, like for Majin Buu specifically, it's like I really would have preferred, like I would have liked to seen that in the first game, because like the first game, and I get like the logistics and whatnot, but that's the way I would have liked to have seen it, not played out the way that they did. And one other thing I noticed, and I was watching a couple other YouTubers on, just talking about this game, it does seem like, and this maybe goes into the actual combat, which we're going to talk about, there is also a difficulty curve that I mentioned in the first game, right? So the first game, if you recall, at least what I experienced, and maybe my game was buggy or whatever the heck happened, but I would find that I would just coast through enemies, right? And then I almost felt like machine learning, AI, back in 2002, I felt like the game picked up on that, and it would just throw an enemy, whoever it might, I don't even remember at this point because it was months ago, an enemy would just be unbelievably difficult. And, I'm a scrub. I don't know what I'm doing, right? And somehow I coast through some of them. I'm playing on, like, normal. Actually, maybe I even moved it down to easy. I don't even remember. But then all of a sudden, the enemy would just wipe me, like, it wouldn't even be fair. It wouldn't even be fair. It would kind of be unfair, and it would be multiple losses. And I would get very, very upset because I'm not good at these games. So, okay, that was the first game. But what about this game? This game I actually think is pretty steady. Whether it was me getting better because I played the first game, like getting more familiar, maybe I was paying attention to instructions better, but I will say, when you literally get to my favorite, when you get to the Majin Buu era or arc, I don't know what in God's name they were doing there, but there's the difficulty curve. So I got to admit something to you. I can't remember as a 7 to 10-year-old how I did. And by the way, the years might not line up. I might have played it after it released. When I was young, under a teenager, right? I can't promise you I beat it then, and I certainly can't promise you I beat it now because I didn't. I quit. In fact, remember the whole I accidentally restarted the game? I did that again, and this time I kind of did it on purpose because I just couldn't beat. I don't think it was like the first form. I think maybe it was like the second or third. I was almost done. Like I had maybe one more level in the entire game, but for whatever reason, they decided to up the difficulty to 1,000. So I just am here to say, 21 years later, I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed that yet again, it seems like there's some sort of AI. Now this time it's not. In the first one, it really felt like it was periodic or sporadic or whatever. It felt like every couple times the enemy would realize that you're doing really good and just kick your you-know-where very, very badly. This time, it really was not that bad until towards the end, right? There's other things, by the way, right? Because of the grid, I actually didn't mention this, but there's kind of like effects that take place. So maybe like you're always draining, and can't say I always like those things. When you increase the challenges on me in these type of games, I can't always respond. I managed to do it, and honestly, I will say in terms of the strategy of the grid, it did make me, and maybe makes other people, it makes you rethink where you want to put your people, right? Like you don't want to end up on a spot that's going to screw you over in the map. So you want to play around with it. Maybe you want to pull the enemy a little bit more towards you, right? Or maybe you want to go after them. Sometimes they'll retreat in weird ways. Sometimes they'll attack you in weird ways. Honestly, can't say the AI is perfect in that regard either, but back to the gameplay, okay? Overall, the gameplay is good. Well, I can't say I beat the game, and I'm sorry about that. I actually still had fun, and I went back, as I did in the first game, to look at reviews, right? Like, what were people saying back in 2003? And this is not a surprise for how much even I've said I like the first game more. This game actually, number one, I don't know where or when the jump occurs with, like, critics liking these games. Maybe they never did, but I feel like eventually they do. But the first game, middling, like 74, 76, somewhere in that range. This game even lower. This game is like the high 60s, low 70s. So, I mean, again, is this a better game than the first game? I personally don't think so. The combat is probably somewhat better, but I think as a whole, the game probably isn't better. So I will say I agree in terms of like the lower scores than versus the first game. But man, like, and I said I defended the first game when I saw those scores, low 70s, huh? Like the game is fun, and specifically to the combat, like I've said before, and I would literally keep it exactly the same. It is not the most complex. You're not playing modern day Mortal Kombat. You're not playing Street Fighter. You're not doing all this stuff, but I have a lot of fun. Like it's not. I probably said the exact same thing if you watch the old video. It's not that complicated. There's not that many moves. There's not that many like down, left, right, triangle, square, X. Like there's not many combinations. And I feel like this game does do a better job of trying to differentiate, right? So there's like fusions and other stuff, and that's kind of all separate. But in the first game, what you quickly realize, which does kind of diminish it a bit, a lot of the characters are kind of the same, right? Like maybe they're slightly bigger or whatever, but generally their move sets, and sometimes even, maybe not all of them will have the exact same names, but some of them get pretty darn close, right? This game, I do think, improves it. It's not perfect. Again, you will find, like, and which is probably fair. Like, I would not hold it against the game too much. However, right, you're going back down memory lane. You look at current day stuff, and you can see where things have kind of been fixed, right? Like, you look at a new Street Fighter. You look at the new Tekken. You look at Mortal Kombat. if you were to say that two characters had the same moveset, or maybe there was one difference and you even called them the same, there'd be an uproar, right? There'd be an uprising. They would storm NetherRealm and storm Capcom and stuff. It couldn't happen. Back then, you could get away with it. And it has more characters, or I was like players, roster, whatever you want to call it. It's got a good cast, like a really meaty cast. I kind of skipped over the visuals, but the game looks beautiful. I really like it. I like the first game. Like a lot of things are similar, and they're similar because they're good. I think they did really well. They nailed it the first time, and they nailed it the second time. I also will disagree too. I've seen like Reddit posts and whatnot of people looking back, and I've seen a lot specifically on the visuals. Look, as a guy who's played some game, I've played like the Mega Man games recently. I've been playing these. I mean, yeah, I play a lot of newer games. I'm playing some games from 2009 that are upcoming, right? I'm jumping around a lot. 2003, maybe it's the art style, maybe it's because of like the anime kind of thing, but I like it. I like how it looks. It doesn't give it as much time to shine because of the grid, right? So you don't get as many cutscenes and whatnot. But when you're out there and you're flying, you're punching and you're kicking and all that, kamehameha, like it looks good. I think, yeah, I'm playing it straight from the PS2. Looks pretty solid to me. You're not gonna fool me into thinking it came out this year, but I think it looks pretty good for 21 years old. It probably looks better than some 2005 to 2010 games, to be honest with you. So I'm fine with the visuals. I'm fine with the combat. Again, I think looking back, I really think that's what held the franchise back in terms of like the critics. I think these games did really well. They kept releasing them, right? But I think if you look at what people were saying back then, the simplicity was for a more casual market, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think actually that should have happened, and it did happen, right? So someone like me, I'm not saying like, well, other people don't appreciate it, but I appreciate it because I'm kind of bad, all right? And maybe take that with a grain of salt, right? Where it's like, well, Alex is not very good at fighting games, so of course he's going to like it. Yeah, because it's kind of straightforward. You don't have to take 30 days to learn a new like modern day, you got to be invested. You got to pick a character, and you got to practice. And maybe I should have practiced so I can beat Majin Buu, but ultimately, I feel like in just a short amount of time, you kind of get the grips of all of these characters. Like, I feel like that's the kind of game it's designed to be, and I think it does it rather well. And then, honestly, I kind of want to skip through the rest of it. There's not too much more I want to say. It comes with a lot of similar things that the first game had. I talked about my love for tournament mode. I still love it. It doesn't pack the same punch when I play them kind of back to back, and there's no massive, noticeable differences. Oh, one other thing with combat, let me just throw in, is moving locations. So I'm really I didn't remember that. I didn't know that, but being able, I don't think it's all of the maps, but several maps, if you're close to the edge, being able to knock them through, and you get a pretty nice cinematic cutscene of going through mountains or going through whatever, and you're in a new area. I like that. I liked it. Mortal Kombat, oh my God, maybe Mortal Kombat 10 did that, and I really appreciate it when they did it. So I'm kind of a sucker for like area changes. I think it makes the fights more dynamic, and I think the fights just in general are pretty dynamic. Like I don't know, just like the way you throw things, or you're shooting energy blasts, or you're punching, you're kicking. There's some cool movement to it that I'm always going to appreciate. But the dynamics of moving from one place to the other, I'm kind of a sucker for that kind of stuff. But yeah, overall, look, I primarily did the story mode. I checked out the other features. It's not radically different, as it probably, well, I wouldn't say maybe it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be in terms of the years, right? Like, it came out back-to-back years. How much can they really put into it? You could argue maybe it should have been a little bit more, but I think improvements were made where they needed to be, and I think some steps back were taken, here and there as well. But I really liked it. Like, I'm really glad I'm doing this. I do prefer the first game. And by the way, a secret that I'm a little guilty of, these are the only two I own. I actually, I've tracked them. I've looked. I am going to get my hands on them, and I know how expensive Tenkaichi 2 and 3 are, so I'm really going to hold off on those for now. But this is it. I don't have Budokai 3 on hand. I'm sure, like I said, I know I've played several. Probably I played Tenkaichi 2 and 3 at the very least, but I don't have any of them. So I'm going to have to dip into the bank account. But no, I'm going to get my hands on a physical version of at least Budokai 3. As I said in the beginning, like, I want to make this a thing. We're doing this for Sparking Zero, and we got a lot more games to come. I know there's like handheld games as well, for whether it's Game Boy or DS or whatever it might be. I kind of want to try those ones as well through alternate means, let's just say. But yeah, there's more Dragon Ball content coming, I guess is what I'm getting at. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.